Thanks, Corbin. That's a great question. One of the interesting parts about when you get to launch into space, it's a childhood dream. All right, I started dreaming about being an astronaut back when I was your age. And so I didn't actually go to space until I was 44 years old. So basically 30 years from the time that you start that dream to when you're finally getting to realize that dream. And so when you're sitting on that launch pad, there is definitely a bit of surrealness to it, right? You can't believe you're actually there and that you're getting ready to launch into space. So you're kind of pinching yourself. You can't wait for those for the rocket to actually light, because once that lights and you're going uphill, they're not going to take this flight away from you, because there's a lot of things that could happen when you're in training. You could get hurt, or you could get sick, or they just may need to replace you. So when the rocket finally lights, the childhood dream is coming to fruition. You get to actually go into space, and it is an incredible ride into space. You can just feel the raw power of this rocket, right? It's just unbelievable. There's a lot of shaking and things of that nature. But you also ask about what you can see. And so I'm going to actually show you a little bit of pictures of what we see when we go to space and when you're riding the rocket up, because I think you're going to find it's probably not quite as an amazing view as you might think. So let me come here real quick, and that's not it. That's not the view when you're going into space. But when you are heading uphill into space, if you take a look here on the right-hand side, that's the rocket. So we're sitting right up in here. And actually, this is the crew that I went up into space most recently. It was in 2020 of November. There we are right there. But what we actually see when we're going into space is this. Your face is full of the screens, and you're monitoring the health of the system as you're going uphill. And in case there's any kind of emergencies, you're ready to respond, and you've got procedures there that are going to walk you through the step by step. And so, as you're going uphill and heading into space, you don't have an opportunity really to see a lot, but it's still an incredible ride. And when you do get up there, you actually finally do get some great views. You're right, and it is, right? In fact, on this vehicle, so we rode up on the Crew Dragon. Resilience was the name of the vehicle that we rode up on. And the screens, you've got 3 touch screens up there. And so we can switch between displays and screens, all 3 of them, and really customize the displays the way we liked, or the way we operated well together between myself and Victor Glover, who was my crewmate on. He was the pilot on our mission, and then we had Suichi Noguchi and Shannon Walker, Dr. Shannon Walker, with us as well. But it really was it was pretty neat to be able to use the touch screens and kind of optimize them the way you wanted. Oh gosh, what do we do in space when we're not working? So we're working a lot when we're in space, and in fact, most of the time, we're up very early, and by that's usually around 5 in the morning or so. I usually would get up and exercise, and then about 7:30 or so, we have kind of a meeting with all of the astronauts on board, as well as all the control teams on the ground that are all around the world. And so we talk for about 15 minutes, kind of talk about the day, and then we work until about 7:30 at night. And then at that point, you have another one of these little conferences, and then you get your free time. And at that point, a lot of times we're eating dinner about 7:30 at night. And so by the time you're done with that, you'll then go and you may check your email. In fact, I'm going to share a few things that we did get to do while we were up there. And there's a lot of what you're doing when you're in space in your free time is staying in touch with your family and your friends, but sometimes, and you can see on this picture, you're up there for holidays, and so you get to celebrate together. And this is our crew on board. We're actually celebrating the Russian Orthodox Christmas in this picture. So you do get a little free time. We're just doing a lot of the same things you might do down here on Earth in the holidays. you're sharing food and stories around the dinner table, if you will. And so a lot of fun that way. One of the other things that we get to do with our free time, which is absolutely incredible, we get to, we have an ability to call home, and I can call home all the time. And so I would actually, every night before I go to bed, I would call my wife and my two sons. One of the other things I got to do, and this was on my first mission back in 2013, my sons play hockey, and so they were playing youth hockey. And in this video that you're seeing, I'm actually on board the International Space Station watching my sons play hockey live. And so that's my wife there. She has the tablet or the iPad, and she's following the game, and she's got an earpiece in, and she's talking to me. You can kind of see me in the background. And so that's one of the things that we do, are able to do while we're in space, is kind of those special moments, those video conferences with your family once a week. Because what that does is it allows you to stay connected to home, and those moments are so important for us because with that connection with home while you're working all those long hours that I talked about, it's a little bit easier when you've had that half hour with your family in moments like that. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is amazing the connectivity that we have up there. But one of the things, so we're actually using satellites to communicate with the ground. So we communicate with the satellite. That transmission gets passed down to the ground, and so there are times though, as we're going around the Earth, that we drop out of. We don't have line of sight with those satellites, and so we'll have periods of time where you don't have that same kind of communication. It's kind of interesting because, like at night, when I was saying after dinner, everybody will be in their crew quarters and they'll be on the phone talking home, and then we'll hit one of those passes where we lose comm, which means the phone doesn't work anymore, the video conference. And so at that time, everybody will poke their heads out of their crew quarters, and we'll just sit and we'll chat for the 10 or 15 minutes that you might have without comm. And then as soon as you see the green light that says comm's back on, everybody goes back. Everybody goes back in and calls home again. Yeah, Saka, that's a great question, because the human body is pretty amazing how it adapts to the environment that it's in. And so you will adapt to life in that zero gravity environment where you're floating and all of that. And so what's interesting about it is when you come back to Earth after, say, the 6-month mission in outer space, and keep in mind, while you've been in space for that entire time, you have exercised about an hour and a half to 2 hours every day. And that includes lifting weights. And then that's every day pretty much. And then typically you're either going to use the exercise bike or you're going to run on a treadmill. And so those are the two or the three main ways we exercise. You do that. So your body, at least from a muscle standpoint, is just about as strong as it was before you left Earth. But then after 6 months, you kind of have forgotten what gravity is like. And so when you land, when you splash down, all of a sudden everything is so heavy, and your mind doesn't know how to tell your muscles how much force it needs to use to move something. And I remember after my first mission, this was again back in 2013, we landed in 2014. I rode up on a Soyuz, and we had landed, and there's a little window off to the side. And so you're kind of laying back, you're on your back, and we're upright, and so the window is right there. And so I'm just trying to pick my head up to look out the window, and I can't. I mean, it feels so heavy. And so it was funny because the cosmonaut that was the commander of it, Oleg, he looks over and he sees me struggling to do that, and he says, "Mike, just use your mirror." And so there's a mirror on your wrist. And if you just use that, it's a little bit easier because now you can just use the mirror to look out the window. And so it does. It's amazing how you feel heavy. Yeah, that piece of it comes back pretty quick. I would say within the 24 to 48 hours, things start to feel normal. And that's what I mean. The body adapts pretty well to it. There's other things though. So we've got this inner ear that helps stabilize us down here in gravity. And so gravity's telling, is giving signals to your inner ear, and that's what we're using to be able to stand upright and walk around. And that's one of those things as well. When you're up in zero gravity for 6 months, your inner ear doesn't have that signal anymore from gravity, right? And so when you land and all of a sudden it's got it again, it is, I mean, it's really hard, and you're very unstable. You can be very unstable, and it can cause nausea and things of that nature. I can remember when I first got back, just in those first few days, and you're just leaning over, I mean, this kind of a motion just to wash your hands or something in a sink, and that little motion just like that, and I would feel like I was just going to face plant right into the sink, because in space, if I did that little bit of a motion, I'm just going to do a flip, and so you gotta readjust to what normal is after you get back to gravity. So that's an interesting question. Right now, at least with NASA, if you're going to become an astronaut, you're going to have a STEM background. So science, technology, engineering, and math. But I will also tell you there are different levels of skills, and she actually said skills. So there's different levels of skills that you have to have depending on what you do in the STEM field. And so what do I mean by that? I mean, astronauts, we come from all walks of life. You've got pilots, you've got engineers like myself, we have microbiologists, we have physicists, we have teachers that they taught in a STEM field. We've got geologists, we've got Navy SEALs and submariners. And so you name it, that we all come from different places in life. And so you are going to have to take some math and some physics, and you're going to have some of that, but you don't have to be a physicist. Now, my crewmate, Dr. Shannon Walker, she was a physicist, but I wasn't. I got to tell you, in fact, I had to work really, really hard in college to get through physics. My first physics test when I was a freshman at the University of Illinois, I go in, I take my first physics test, it comes back with a D. And that was, they were being generous to me, I think. So it didn't come naturally to me. I had to work really, really hard at physics to get through it, but I did. And so you are going to have to take some math and some physics if you want to be an astronaut, at least with NASA. But again, you don't have to be a physicist or a mathematician. There's different levels that you can get through to. So do whatever you really are passionate about. Yeah, Zoe, that's a great question. So how do we breathe in the suit? So the suit is like a kind of picture it maybe like a balloon, right? Except it's just this special shape, and you've got a helmet on it and all of that. And so we put air inside that balloon. In fact, what we put inside the suit is actually oxygen. Now, Zoe, what happens when we breathe in the oxygen, right? We breathe out carbon dioxide. And so we've got to find a way to get rid of that carbon dioxide in our suits, because if we just kept breathing in oxygen and breathing out carbon dioxide in this closed balloon, we're eventually going to use up all the oxygen, and all we're going to have is carbon dioxide, and we're not going to be able to breathe. So the suits have an ability to absorb the carbon dioxide and continue to supply us with oxygen. And that's how we are able to go outside for over, I mean, we usually are going about 6 to 7 hours outside, but you can be outside for as many as 8 hours or more, and you've got that much oxygen and ability to absorb that carbon dioxide. Great question.
My name's Roy and I'm 5 years old. When you are on the outside of the space station, can you fly in space?
Wow, can you fly in space? Well, Rye, that's another interesting question. So when we fly here, like when you see birds flying or airplanes flying, one of the things that they are taking advantage of to be able to do that is the air. And when you're in space, there's no air. So a wing like that isn't going to be able to create lift, which is going to hold you up and not allow you to do this. And so I'm going to share some pictures with you, Rye. And let's see, let me share my screen here real quick. And let's take a look at our spacesuits here. So here we go. All right, I think you guys can see that. So that's our spacesuit. And so when the question right before that in terms of how do you breathe, so inside that helmet is me. And inside there's a bunch of oxygen. That's how I'm breathing. But you notice this is kind of a big and bulky suit, and you don't really fly around in that. In fact, it's actually pretty hard to move around. What I can show you, the one time I did kind of fly is if you look at this picture here, this is a big robotic arm. This is 60 feet long, and that's me right there on the end of a robotic arm holding on to a replacement part that I was going to install way up here. And so I guess you could say I was flying sort of. I'm flying down below the space station, and there's nothing below me and the Earth, which is 400 kilometers below me. And so I think that is the one case when I got to ride around on this robotic arm that I did a little bit of flying in space. Paga, that is an impossible question to answer. It really is. So what I am going to do is I'm going to share, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15, maybe about 10 photos with you that were taken from the International Space Station, that I took from the International Space Station. And then I'm also at the end, I'm going to show you a little video. And so as I show you all these pictures, I want you to kind of think about which one would you say is the most beautiful, and it's really hard to do. So let's see what this looks like here. So here we go. Let's go back to the slideshow. And these are pictures of Earth looking from the International Space Station. So this is sand dunes in the Middle East. And just incredible. This is called the recap structure in North Africa. That's the Grand Canyon in the United States. And this is just these amazing clouds that look like a paintbrush over the deserts in the Southwest. That's actually the Mediterranean Ocean at night. And that's the moon reflecting off of the water with all of the city lights down there in Italy. This is an island in the Pacific, probably fairly close to New Zealand. And the funny story about this, I actually put this out on Twitter. And I said, wow, it was really cool. I got to see 2 volcanoes today. And somebody responded on Twitter and said, no, that's not 2 volcanoes. That's just one. It just has 2 vents. And so you always learn something, even when you're on board the International Space Station. But here's a typhoon in the Pacific. And so it's an amazing picture. But one of the reasons I like to show this is it reminds you that when you see something like this from space and it looks beautiful, but there's a lot of people on Earth that are in harm's way. And so sometimes it's easy to lose perspective for that the connection when you're up in space. And so you sometimes have to think about that. Some more pictures from the desert, the fields with all of the crops in the Midwest of the United States. This is probably one of my favorite pictures. It looks like a painting to me. And what you're actually looking at, this is in the Caribbean. And so there's this area where there's a very deep water that's real blue, and then there's shallower water around it. And what you're actually seeing is the sand formations through the water from space. Truly incredible. And then, of course, the northern lights or the southern lights. are pretty amazing. And now the last thing I'm going to show you, this is going to be a view from my crew quarter. So I was actually sleeping in the Crew Dragon Resilience, and I had a couple windows in there. And this is when it's the night pass. This is what the view looks like. This is a time lapse. And so what you're going to see here is the night sky. This is actually the atmosphere. It's about 100 kilometers. It's keeping us alive. And then this is the Earth down below. And so let's take a quick look at that view. And again, this is what I get to see 16 times a day, because we go around the Earth 16 times a day. So we have 16 night passes like this. And it never, ever, ever gets old. So my question for you is, what is the most beautiful thing you've seen from space? And it is really, really hard to say there's just one thing, because it is all incredible. We have a lot of cameras on board the International Space Station. So some of them, like a lot of what you saw, was just me taking incredible pictures of the Earth. On the other hand, we do have a crew Earth observation as part of the science that we'll do on board. And so they'll send up specific targets that they want us to take pictures of. And so we have a wide variety of cameras, lenses, a lot of photographic equipment on board the International Space Station. Well, Kiana, we eat a lot in space. We actually have a pretty wide variety of a menu, probably 200 different types of foods that we can eat. But a lot of it, well, most of it has to be prepared well in advance. And so some of it is freeze dried. And actually, I think I have a picture. I'll show you some pictures of some of the food that we actually have on board. And so some of it is what we call freeze dried. So they basically take all of the water out of it. And then, let's see, right here. And then you have to rehydrate it. So believe it or not, that is stuffing, and those are green beans. And I think this is like a mac and cheese. So those are kind of the foods where they dehydrate them, and they take all of the water out of them, and then you have to put water back in. And then we have food, and this is smoked turkey, and that's been irradiated. So it's been cooked, it's been put in these bags and treated in a way that it's not going to spoil. And so everything we eat on board station comes in these individual little packages, portions, so we don't have a full meal. You basically, when you want to eat, you go around and you'll pick the various items that you want, and you'll heat them up, and then you'll have a dinner with quite a variety. But you are eating, and you can kind of see over here as well, everything's out of these individual bags like that. Now, we do get to send up some food that is, kind of your personal food, special food, bonus type food, if you will. And so I kind of have a sweet tooth, and so I may have sent up a little bit of candy along with me, because I like my little treats once in a while. I do have one more thing that I'd like to share. So when we get to go into space, we are allowed to take a few personal items up with us. And it's not very much, because it can cost anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000 a pound to send things up into space to the International Space Station. And so when they tell you that, hey, we're going to give you about 3 pounds of stuff that you can send up with you, you want to make sure it has meaning, or it's important to you as well. And so I actually got to visit New Zealand back in 2000, I think it was 2014, and I spent, I think, almost a week on the islands, and just had a wonderful time. And while I was there, I got a Maori toki pendant. And so I was able to actually take this pendant up into space with me. And so to prove that, I will show you the pictures of me being able to take this up, and I'll show you that it did actually go into space. And so hopefully you'll be able to see this, but there it is. And so this is in the window of the cupola. And so you're looking down at the Earth. This is the vehicle that we actually were able to, that we came up to the space station in. And so that just kind of given, this is all the space station here. But that is the Toki Mare pendant that I brought back from New Zealand when I visited back in 2014. So I got to take a little bit of New Zealand with me to the International Space Station. Just an amazing country, and I really, really enjoyed my time there. Well, I would love to, but the time and all of that, I'm actually right now, I'm still active duty military. And so right now I'm actually doing a rotation at the Pentagon. And so I've been pretty busy with that, but maybe sometime in the future, I would love to be able to come back. I'd love to be able to bring my family with me as well and show them some of the sights in New Zealand, because it truly is an incredible place.